So for the record, I'm talking here with Steve
Brown.
Sylvia Hutchings.
And Deborah Hutchings.
Okay, well, it's great to see you. And you've come to Othona today because of an event 75 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, March, was it
Yeah,
the 16th?
March the 16th, 1945.
Yeah.
And what happened then?
My father and Sylvia's father, Ralph Brown, was stationed at Warmwell Aerodrome, which is pretty close to here, I think. And he'd returned from the war, where he was in the RAF and he was part of Air Sea Rescue. So we flew Walrus aircraft all around the Mediterranean, recovering mainly downed airmen that had been shot down, around that locality. So he saw active service, he was shot at, he was chased by Messerschmitts and all manner of things. So he, the things that he did, he along with all the other servicemen, he was pretty brave in terms of, he was only a young man, 24 years of age.
And he'd survived all that and come back
Survived
to Britain.
all that.
The war was almost over.
The war was, so he would have been stationed at Warmwell, and his duties there were to fly an aircraft which towed a target for bomber crew to use as target practice. So the aircraft had a gun on the rear, a turret. So my father would fly the aircraft and the gunner would shoot at the target that was being towed behind the aircraft. And on the particular day, the aircraft developed engine problems and the engine cut out. So my father knew he was going to have to crash land the aircraft. He wasn't near the aerodrome. He was actually, at the time, very close to where we are now. And he asked the lad who was training to release the target at a certain time so that he could hopefully land the aircraft safely. But the young man froze and couldn't do anything, so he couldn't release the target. And so therefore it culminated in a crash landing. That's, no blame to anybody, that's just the way it was. But in the crash, my father was trapped by his feet in the aircraft, which caught fire.
And that crash was somewhere in the fields very close to Othona.
Absolutely.
Here.
Burton Mere.
Yeah, and the story that we were told when we were children was that there was a convent or a nunnery very close by, and that one of the nuns had run out to the aircraft and actually, through the flames, had managed to release him and actually physically dragged him from the aircraft.
And this was one of the White Ladies, the community of Christian contemplatives who lived here at the time.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
preceded the Othona community on this side.
Yeah, we knew that the person involved, she received a medal that had to go to Buckingham Palace, and she was, rewarded in that way, if that's the right word, but at least, acknowledged that her bravery and, and the fact that she saved this young airman's life, who then was able to go on and have a family and a happy life, and died in his late 80s.
So he was quite injured by the crash.
His right leg was amputated below the knee, and at that time, amputations, the technology and it wasn't brilliant, and the lower part of his leg that was amputated, the skin was very close, his muscles were very close to the bone. So for many, many years, it was always ulcerated, and he would have to scrub the ulcers out himself. And he was in constant pain, but he was the kind of person that just got on with it. He always worked. He refused to accept help from the state. So as soon as he was well enough, he worked all his working life. till he retired at 65 or whatever. So
Because he wanted to fly again, didn't he? But they wouldn't let him.
yeah, the RAF wouldn't accept him back as aircrew. He may well have been able to get a job, but I think technically they gave him a discharge. He was discharged on medical grounds.
So the woman who rescued him, you, from those childhood stories, you knew her name?
We did. We knew that it was Evelyn Bendy, I think, was.
It was Harriet Evelyn Bendy,
Yeah,
I think, was a full
We
name.
always were told Evelyn. I think that was the name that we got, and that we knew the general location.
Well, that's a name, her given name, that she also kept but adapted when she became a member of the community here, because she was known here as Sister Evelyn St Paul. Evelyn Bendy was her family surname.
Right. Yeah. So she's always been quite a special person for the Brown family in terms of.
And you see, I'd heard this story, and one of the things I'd heard particularly from one of her surviving nephew was that she was scandalised by the thought that she was going to be spoken about in the press, let alone going up to Buckingham Palace to get a medal, because she was trying to live an enclosed life, I mean, hidden away from the world pretty well.
Yeah.
And the last thing she wanted was to be treated like a heroine, though she clearly had been.
Yeah.
It must have been, I mean, to pull a man from, the cockpit was burning at the time because he...
Yeah, the cockpit was on fire, and there was also, allegedly, because there were live firing at the target, there was live ammunition that was being set off by the fire in the surrounding area where obviously it had spilled out or whatever. So yeah, there would be bangs and all manner of things going off, and obviously an aircraft full of fuel. And I'm assuming, that Evelyn would probably have been aware of that. It was a very dangerous situation to be in. That she, I can't confirm it, but I was always told that she'd burnt her finger. Rescuing my father resulted in burns to her hands and things like that. So, a real... She was a heroine, there's no two ways about it.
I'm afraid we don't know the rights or wrongs about the burnt hands.
No.
But we did know of the story. Now, there's another story to unravel here, because how come... Steve, you've told us most of that, but we've heard Sylvia's voice as well. What's the relationship between you two?
Sorry,
What's the relationship between you two, Sylvia?
we're half brother and sister. Ralph was my father as well.
And when did you two meet?
On Saturday.
For the first time?
2 days ago.
So there's quite a story there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, I can do. My mother met Ralph when he was stationed in Peterborough. Apparently he was sat on the wall and she walked by and he said something cheeky to her, so of course she stopped, and from then on they spent quite a lot of time together.
I think one thing led to another, is
It
what
did.
people say.
And I was the end result, yes. But of course by then he'd moved on, was stationed elsewhere, and they lost touch. And so other than what my grandmother told me, and then my mum did tell me bits.
So did you know you had a brother somewhere?
No, not at all, no.
And is it
I
just the
knew
two of
nothing.
you, or are there other siblings?
No, nobody knew, did they?
No, well, I'm the youngest. I've got a brother next and a sister by Ralph and our mothers, and then Sylvia's the eldest. So actually Sylvia's inherited a sister and two brothers.
Good heavens. And you only met on Saturday for the first time?
Yeah.
That must have taken some... Was this as a result of research or chance?
Yes, my daughters, I've got two daughters, Deborah and Dawn, and they grew up knowing everything and knew how much I really wanted to know my father.
And had you found out about his wartime escapades, and particularly this
No,
rescue?
because I
Did you
didn't
know
e-
about the crash?
No, I didn't even know if he'd survived the war.
Good heavens.
I knew nothing. But it's like Deborah said, every armistice or day, I would sit there and they would get the box of tissues because I'd be searching the faces. Because my mother had letters and photographs of him, always looking for this face. And of course, I never saw, but I wasn't looking for a man with one leg anyway. That was a complete shock to me that when we found out. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, on Father's Day, we'd been talking, the girls came down to spend Father's Day with their dad, and we were talking about it, and Debbie and Sue went home, and, I don't know, about 11 o'clock, she suddenly phoned up and she said, I found your dad.
Oh, Deborah, tell us what you did.
The good old internet, the World Wide Web. Searched. We've done it before. We've spent many hours at Somerset House searching through records, trying to find an inkling of where we might find Ralph Brown. But this one particular day, like Mum said, we'd been down to spend Father's Day with Dad and do our daughterly duties, and we went home and just thought, we've got to give this another go. We need to find. Surely there must be some information out there. So I came across a article which I think was the Derby Telegraph, which talked about this gentleman being a bit of a hero. You know, he kind of worked, was a pilot in the RAF and was land sea kind of rescuer, and there was a picture. So Mum doesn't have it in the internet, so we couldn't just ping her an email with a link so she could look at it. So we got in the car late at night and drove 30 miles to show Mum what we'd found on our phones. And at that point in time, it listed Steve as being a son, as well as Diana, his sister, and Ray, his brother. So
And the picture
we knew,
you'd found up matched up with the pictures you
The picture
You'd
in
had
my
anyway.
mind, because
Yes.
in your mind.
in 1985, my mother invited us down for the weekend, which was quite unusual. And we got there and she couldn't wait to get the children bathed and in bed. And then she sent her husband, that she was married to then, off with my husband to get them out of the way. And then she suddenly appeared with a handful of letters. And as soon as I saw them, I knew what they were, because as a nosy child, I'd stood on a chair and got a little case off the top of the wardrobe one day, and I found these letters and photographs, and I read them, but I didn't know what they meant. I didn't know what it was to do with. So as soon as she appeared, I thought, I know what they are, but I didn't know who'd written them or what it was about. So when she handed it, she said, I want you to read these. She said, they're from your dad. So I read them. I memorised his service number, and I thought, I'll write to the RAF and I'll see what I can find out from them. And I said, could I have these? And she suffered with a little bit of depression problems, really, but she was treated for all sorts of things that she didn't have. So sometimes she wasn't herself. So she said to me, no, they're none of your business. It had crossed my mind to slip one out, but I thought, oh no, if she finds out, I will be in real trouble. So I didn't, but I just memorised the number, which I can tell you right now. And that was that. So afterwards, I wrote to the RAF, and in the end, it turned out all they would do was send a letter to his last known address.
Right.
They didn't know whether he was still alive, but he was alive in 1947. So I sent the letter off. I wrote the letter and I checked it with our vicar, And I said, is there anything there that I've written wrong or could be taken wrongly or hurt anybody? And he said, no, that is fine, because he knew the story. He said, you send it. Well, it was returned, I don't know, about 3 or 4 months later. It came back. And then I had a letter with it from the RAF saying that it was returned to them because I had to address it a certain way.
Yes.
And then they obviously put a label over it and sent it on, and that label was taken off. And they said he was not known at that address, so there was nothing more they could do. They suggested I got in touch with some family service branch.
And so until Deborah and her sister did their further research, this was still a loose end in
That's
your
right,
life,
that's
and
right.
a rather painful one by the sound
That's
of it.
right. And then in lockdown, it was when, because we'd been on our own for a long, long time, and then when somebody was allowed to visit, my youngest daughter, Dawn, came with my granddaughter, Lara. We were sitting in the garden, sort of miles away from each other, and something made me tell Lara the whole story. So she said nothing, and they left. And then the next morning, Dawn came in with Lara. Luckily, Deborah was there at the time. They were in the garden with my husband. And she said, Mother, sit down. And I thought, well, you've never spoken to me. And I said, what? No, there's nothing wrong. Just don't worry, just sit down. Lara was jumping around. An 18-year-old she is, or was. And she said, come on, you two, I want you in here. I've got something to say. So she came in, and as they came in the door, she turned round, she said, Mum, I found your sister, and here's her phone number. Well, I went through so many emotions in 10 seconds, I don't know quite what I did. And Dawn said, well, leave it for a bit, but phone her later.
And that's how we have you visiting here
That's
together
right.
today.
Well, Dawn went home, and Lara said to her, we've got to find Nan's family. It's obvious, it's so important to her. We've got to do something. And Dawn remembered the name of my sister's grandson, wouldn't it be, Nick?
Sister's
Son.
son.
Oh, son, that's
Yes.
right. Yeah, my sister's son. Even I'd forgotten that, I've got lots of bits of writing, we'd scribbled on everything. And she looked for Nick on the internet, and she found him, and within 5 minutes of starting, she was talking to him. And he said, are you trying to tell me that my mother and your sister, my mother and your mother are sisters? And she said, yes, I am. So it sort of went on from there. I did phone Diane that day, and we spoke for about an hour. And then one day, got it written down at home, I suddenly had a phone call, and this voice said, it's Steve, your brother. So we've been in contact ever since.
Yeah.
And this week, on Saturday, Steve drove from Derbyshire to Devon, where he's renting a cottage just outside on the edge of the village. Oh, town, I mustn't say village. And yes, we met up on Saturday for the very first time.
Yeah.
And you've taken some time together to make this outing. Almost a pilgrimage.
Absolutely. Well,
I think.
when I knew that Steve hadn't been here, and I said, well, I have, and I'd dearly love to take you.
So you were able to look together at the plaque on the wall.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Commemorates Sister Evelyn St Paul, 1877 to 1961,
That's right.
as well as her nephew, who coincidentally died as an airman during the war, having been an associate member of the community here. Because he was male, he couldn't become a full member. But he was very closely associated with the White Ladies, the community of Christian contemplatives.
And that was wonderful.
But I think it was important you found that article, so...
Yeah, so
That's
kind
right.
of after finding the Derby Telegraph article, which listed the family members and also a photograph of Ralph. Obviously, at that point, we'd obviously realised that it became apparent that Ralph was now deceased. He had passed, which was, you know, kind of, it was, you know, a great shame. We thought it was, you know, we were hoping that he might still be with us, and that, you know, we might be having a meeting with him, but you know, but it kind of didn't really stop there, because obviously I forget how the article was worded and whether it mentioned something about the you know, the plane crash here in Dorset, but maybe then start looking into that a little bit more. Because obviously we didn't have anything to grasp at. We didn't have all the other jigsaw pieces that we have now. So it was finding out about my family history, Mum's family history. So that's why we're here today, because last September, so September 19, I emailed Othona here and asked for help. And I had a response from Liz, which was, you know, fantastic. She couldn't help, but she did help, because she passed me on to Alison Bendy, which I actually think is Sister Evelyn's great niece. She then sent me links on information about the White Ladies, gave us some information that we didn't have. But Mum could then share that with her brother Steve, because actually, you know, it brings more of the jigsaw pieces together, because, you know, we're here and we've walked down towards the mere on a cold, blustery
9th
day.
of September last year.
9th of September, which was my birthday actually. We came for an outing for my birthday to come and visit. And then my mum and dad came back a couple of days later to visit.
Next day.
So obviously, you know, Mum really wanted to bring Steve here, because it's also part of his family history.
Yes.
So it's all about putting those jigsaw pieces together for us all to understand.
Of course, Steve, if he hadn't been saved that day, you wouldn't be here.
No.
It'd be an empty chair.
No, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
that's it. You know, and
That's what I say. It seems a shame. I can understand the feelings at the time of, because Sister Evelyn had brought attention to it, but my belief system and my value base is that, you know, what she did that day, totally selfishly, selflessly, you know, enabled a huge family to blossom out of her actions, and that cannot be kept. So I struggle a little bit with the concept of why. I understand it, struggle a little bit, because I think she brought, you know, from a diminutive, you know, woman who ran out to that burning plane. It's so much has come out of her actions that, no, I don't expect. She is a hero in my mind. There's no doubt about it. And so, at least her story, you know, is now being recorded by you and our families, and it will be handed down for a few generations, I hope.
Definitely.
You know, so she's a very special person in our lives, really.
Well, somewhere we read that she just dragged him clear as the plane exploded.
Yeah.
That was written in one of the newspaper cuttings we had.
Yeah, there'd have been plenty of people that probably wouldn't have taken the action she took
Not
that
that
day.
risk.
And I think that's testament to who she was as a person, a human being, and her beliefs and her value base, you know, that life is worth putting your life on the line for. So we might have had a fighter pilot father, but there's another hero that wore flowing white dress. You know, amazing, absolutely amazing. So it's been a real pleasure to come and it's a shame that the Brown side of the family, you know, my sister and my brother, myself and my dad never decided to come back, and he never mentioned it. He would talk about it freely, but he never expressed a desire to come back. And I don't even think it was because he was psychologically affected by it. I think he just, you know, it was one of those things that happened. What I do think is he probably would have wanted to meet Sister Evelyn. You know, again, he didn't say it, but he was the kind of person that I think he would have been very touched to have met up with her, and it never happened. That's a shame, but I don't know how it would have gone down with Sister Evelyn and at the you know, the regime at the time, but I'm sure he would have been pretty chuffed to have met up with her.
So Sylvia, what's all this meant for you personally?
It tells me who I am. I've always lived thinking I was nobody and nothing. But now I know who I am, and I feel totally different. That day that Steve spoke to me just changed my life completely. It's made such a big difference. Nobody can really understand, I don't think. It was so important, so very important.
Well, Deborah, Steve, Sylvia, thanks so much for telling us your story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're
Making
very
us so
welcome.
welcome.
For today, it's been brilliant. Yeah,
And thank you that her memorial is on the wall for everybody to see.
yeah, excellent.
It's just sad they don't know the true hero that she was.